The wall was everything. It wasn't just brick, concrete, and steel. It was a promise. A fragile one, sure, but a promise all the same. As long as the wall stood, we could pretend the world outside didn't exist. We could pretend the moans of the undead didn't echo in the night, that we weren't a few bad days away from being overrun. I'd always thought it would hold. Hell, we all did. Until it didn't. I was hauling supplies through Eastgate Square when it happened. The air smelled like stale sweat and diesel, typical for a city barely holding itself together. The marketplace buzzed with energy, people trading scraps of hope, canned peaches, ammunition, half-used lighters. Kids ran underfoot, laughing in a way only kids could these days. Oblivious, innocent. Then the explosion came. It hit like a goddamn sledgehammer to the world. The ground buckled beneath my boots, and the sky turned white-hot for a split second before a shockwave sent me sprawling. My ears rang so hard I thought I'd gone deaf. When I scrambled to my feet, the square was unrecognizable. The stalls were obliterated, nothing but twisted metal and splintered wood. Smoke and dust hung thick in the air, and screams, sharp, gut-wrenching screams, cut through the haze. And then I saw it, the wall, a gaping wound of rubble and rebar where it once stood tall. Beyond the breach, a mass of bodies writhed, pale and rotting, pushing through the gap like water breaking through a dam. The Horde had come. "Move!" I bellowed, my voice tearing against the chaos. People didn't need telling twice. The square erupted into panic, everyone running in every direction. But panic gets you killed. I'd seen it too many times. I grabbed a kid, couldn't have been more than 8, and yanked him out of the way as a Whisperer emerged from the dust. It was gaunt, its flesh stretched thin over brittle bones, moving with an eerie, silent precision. The thing's head tilted as it stalked closer, its milky white eyes locking onto the boy. "Not today, you bastard." I swung my crowbar hard, the metal crunching through its skull with a wet, nauseating sound. It crumpled, but there were more coming. Always more. Creepers darted through the rubble next, their small, twisted forms skittering like feral animals. A pack of them overwhelmed a man trying to fight them off with a knife. His screams didn't last long. Blood sprayed across the pavement as they tore into him with teeth sharper than they had any right to be. "Sonny, over here." A voice cut through the chaos. Daniels, one of the city's militia. He was waving me toward a makeshift barricade forming at the south end of the square. I hoisted the kid onto my back and ran, weaving through the carnage. A howler's scream pierced the air, that unholy sound that made your guts twist and your knees go weak. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Big mistake. The howler stood atop the rubble of the wall, its gaping maw splitting open as if its jaw were unhinged. The thing howled again, and the Horde responded, surging forward with terrifying speed. We barely made it to the barricade. Daniels pulled us through, shoving debris into place behind us. The kid clung to me, sobbing, his tiny fists gripping the fabric of my jacket. "Where's command?" I demanded, panting as I dropped the kid behind the barricade. Daniels shook his head, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "No idea. Comms are down. We're on our own." Perfect. The barricade rattled as the first wave hit, a dozen rotting hands clawing over the edge. I swung my crowbar until my arms burned. Each hit a desperate plea to keep breathing a little longer. Beside me, Daniels fired his shotgun, the blasts deafening in the confined space. "Reloading!" he shouted, just as a ravenous swooped in from above. I tackled him out of the way as the thing's claws raked through the air where his head had been. The ravenous screamed, circling back for another attack. "We can't hold this," Daniels shouted, panic creeping into his voice. He was right. The barricade was buckling, the undead relentless. Whisperers slithered through gaps, their silent movements almost graceful. A creeper leapt over the top, its jagged teeth snapping inches from my face before I drove my crowbar into its chest. "We fall back," I barked. "Get to the southern alley. Go!" Daniels hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. He helped the kid climb down, his hands trembling as he tried to reload. The howler screamed again, louder this time. The Horde surged, and the barricade gave way. "Move!" I roared, shoving Daniels and the kid ahead of me. The alley was a narrow, filthy death trap, but it was our only option. We sprinted, the Horde pouring in behind us like a tidal wave. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. At the alley's end, I skidded to a halt. A dead end. Daniel swore, his shotgun trembling in his hands. "What now?" Before I could answer, the Howler's scream echoed again, impossibly close. They were coming, and I wasn't sure we'd make it out alive. We had seconds, maybe less. The alley pulsed with the sound of the Horde, their groans and snarls rising into a hellish cacophony. The Howler's scream rang out again, a guttural wail that sent chills racing down my spine. Behind me, the kid whimpered, his tiny frame trembling against the cold stone wall. Daniels looked at me, his shotgun shaking in his hands. "Sonny, what do we do?" The Horde's shadow bled into the alley, Whisperers gliding ahead of the pack like phantoms, their milky eyes locking onto us. "Up," I said, pointing to a rusted fire escape halfway down the wall. Daniels didn't argue. He hoisted the kid first, boosting him up toward the ladder. I climbed after, every muscle screaming as I pulled myself higher. Below us, the undead surged forward, clawing at the walls, their jagged fingers ripping chunks of brick as they reached for our legs. The creepers were the worst. They scrambled up the walls like spiders, their thin, twisted limbs bending in ways that weren't natural. One lunged, its teeth snapping inches from my boot. I kicked out hard, its body tumbling into the writhing mass below. Daniels was the last up, panting as he hauled himself onto the platform. "They'll climb after us," he shouted, fumbling with his shotgun. "We don't give them the chance," I barked, motioning to the rooftop. "Go!" We ran. The rooftop was uneven, its cracked surface dotted with old machinery and broken vents. Behind us, the creepers shrieked as they followed, their pack scuttling over the walls like cockroaches. "Sonny, what the hell are those things?" Daniels yelled, his voice ragged with fear. "Creepers," I spat. "And if you stop running, you'll get a damn close look." Ahead, the rooftop ended. Another building loomed a few feet away, a gap just wide enough to make you hesitate. "Jump!" I shouted, not breaking stride. The ground fell away beneath me as I launched myself across the gap. For one terrifying moment, I thought I wasn't going to make it. Then my hands hit the opposite edge and I pulled myself up, gasping. The kid made it next, Daniels close behind. A creeper wasn't far behind him, its claws scraping across the rooftop as it lunged. Daniels swung his shotgun like a bat, smashing the creature mid-air. Its body crumpled against the wall and fell, its screams lost in the sea of the Horde below. "We can't keep this up," Daniels panted, doubling over as the adrenaline started to fade. "Agreed," I said, scanning the city below. The streets were chaos. The undead swarmed in every direction, Whisperers slipping silently through the carnage while Howlers summoned reinforcements. Fires dotted the horizon, their smoke choking the sky. Then I saw it. A maintenance tunnel entrance, half hidden behind an overturned truck. It wasn't much, but it was something. "There," I pointed, already moving. "If we can get underground, we might stand a chance." Daniels followed, the kid clutching his hand as we leapt from rooftop to rooftop. Each jump felt more desperate, the undead growing closer with every passing second. We reached the last building, the truck below still smoldering from the explosion. The ladder down was a twisted wreck. "No way down," Daniels muttered. I glanced at the Horde below, then at the broken fire escape. "We jump." "Sonny!" "Do you want to die up here?" I snapped. Daniels swallowed hard, then nodded. I grabbed the kid and held him close. "Close your eyes, kid. You don't want to see this." He didn't argue. I leapt first, landing hard on the truck's roof. Pain shot through my knees, but I bit it back. Daniels followed, his landing less graceful but effective. The Horde surged toward us as we hit the ground running, the entrance to the maintenance tunnel just ahead. A Howler screamed again, its cry echoing in my skull. "They're too close!" Daniels shouted, firing into the crowd. The blast shredded a Whisperer, but the Horde didn't slow. I grabbed a fallen metal pipe and swung with everything I had, caving in the skull of a creeper lunging for the kid. Its body collapsed, twitching at my feet. "Go!" I roared, shoving the kid toward the tunnel. Daniels pulled open the rusted hatch, practically throwing the kid inside. I followed, the cold darkness of the tunnel swallowing us whole. Daniels slammed the hatch shut just as the first undead reached it, their bodies slamming against the metal with sickening force. We were safe, for now. The tunnel stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. The air reeked of mildew and decay, and fungal growths clung to the walls like tumors. Daniels groaned, leaning against the wall. That was too close. I nodded, my chest heaving. Too close is better than dead. The kid looked up at me, his wide eyes glistening with tears. Are we gonna be okay? I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. We'll make it, kid. Stick with me, and we'll make it. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The tunnel reeked of death. Every step echoed like a gunshot, bouncing off the damp walls. The kid clung to my hand, his little fingers digging into mine with the kind of desperate strength only fear could give. Daniel stayed close, shotgun at the ready, his flashlight cutting through the oppressive gloom. The spores started about 20 feet in, clinging to the walls like veins. They pulsed faintly, glowing a sickly green, their alien texture slick with moisture. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. I tightened my mask, checking the kids and Daniel's to make sure they were secure. Keep moving, I said, voice muffled by the filter. Daniels nodded, his eyes darting around the tunnel. The walls felt alive, like they were watching us, breathing with us. Then came the first sound, a wet slithering noise that made my stomach turn. "Sonny," Daniels whispered. I held up a hand, motioning for silence. The noise grew louder, closer, until the first spore shroud emerged from the darkness. It was half man, half monstrosity, its body bloated with fungal growths that burst with spores as it moved. Its face was barely recognizable, its mouth split wide as it let out a guttural hiss. "Light it up!" I shouted. Daniels fired, the shotgun blast tearing into the creature's chest. Spores exploded into the air, and I yanked the kid back, covering his face with my jacket. The spore shroud staggered but didn't fall, its body surging forward like it didn't know it was dead. I swung my crowbar, the metal crunching through its skull. The thing collapsed in a heap, twitching as the fungus tried to keep it moving. "Keep moving!" I barked, dragging the kid forward. We ran, the sound of spore shrouds following us through the tunnel. More of them appeared, shambling from the shadows, their grotesque forms clogging the narrow path. Daniels fired until his gun clicked empty, then switched to his machete, hacking through the creatures with brutal efficiency. The tunnel finally ended at a rusted ladder leading up. I practically threw the kid at it. "Climb! Go!" The kid scrambled up, Daniels and I following close behind. The spore shrouds clawed at the base of the ladder, their bloated hands reaching for us as we climbed. The hatch at the top was jammed, rusted shut. Daniel slammed his shoulder into it, grunting with effort. "It's stuck!" I climbed higher, bracing myself against the ladder as I kicked the hatch with everything I had. It gave way with a screech, and sunlight poured in. We spilled out onto the ground near the gate controls, the city burning around us. The wall loomed in the distance, its breach still pouring undead into the streets. The control station was a small, fortified structure overlooking the breach. Beside it stood Salvation, a mounted machine gun, already prepped and loaded. Daniels saw it too. "Think it works? Let's find out." We sprinted to the station, throwing open the door. The controls were old, but they were still intact. The gate mechanism hummed faintly, waiting for a command. "I'll cover you!" Daniels shouted, taking position behind the machine gun. The Horde was already surging toward us, creepers leading the charge with Howlers trailing behind, their unholy screams rallying the undead. Daniels opened fire. The mounted gun roared to life, its heavy rounds tearing through the Horde like paper. Bodies exploded in bursts of blood and gore, limbs flying as the undead fell in waves. "Get those gates closed!" Daniels yelled over the deafening gunfire. I worked the controls, my fingers trembling as I flipped switches and pulled levers. The gate mechanism groaned, the massive steel doors starting to move. Come on," I muttered. The creepers reached the barricade, scrambling over the bodies of their fallen. Daniels didn't let up, his face set in grim determination as he mowed them down. A howler broke through the chaos, its scream splitting the air. Daniels swung the gun toward it, but the barrel overheated, the gun jamming with a sickening click. "Sonny," he shouted, reaching for his machete. I didn't think. I grabbed the nearest weapon, a broken metal pipe, and charged. The howler lunged, its claws slicing through the air. I ducked, driving the pipe into its throat with all the strength I had. The thing gurgled, its scream cut short as it collapsed in a heap. Behind me, the gates slammed shut with a resounding boom. The city was safer. For now. Daniels leaned against the machine gun, panting. The kid clung to my leg, his wide eyes staring at the carnage. "It's over," Daniels said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, the weight of what we'd just done settling over me. Back at the wall, I found a piece of chalk and scrawled it across the steel. Rule 12. The wall is sacred. We were alive because of it, and we wouldn't forget.